All right, folks, I think we're going to get started here. And thank you so much for joining us tonight. I'm so thrilled to see many of you. Thank you for taking the time to share space with us and to screen our documentary, InJustice, Hidden Crisis in Virginia's Prisons. My name is Mary Bauer. I'm the Executive Director of the ACLU of Virginia, and we're so thrilled to share our documentary with you this evening. Criminal legal reform is one of our top priorities, and prison reform is a critical component of the work. While our goal ultimately is to transform the Virginia carceral system, we also work very hard every day improving prison conditions and to raise awareness about the egregious conditions and policies that currently exist in Virginia's prisons. This film was made in collaboration with Narrative Arts and with over 20 Virginia activist groups. It's a layered account of the conditions in Virginia State Prison, and it highlights the voices of formerly incarcerated people, community organizers, legislators, and issue area experts. Thank you for being with us tonight. I hope the message of this documentary leaves you feeling really empowered to help us bring about change. The movie itself is about 42 minutes, and please stay with us after the screening for a panel discussion with three incredible activists, Sheba Williams, Christopher Rashad Green, and Donald Allen. We'll just go ahead and get started now. Thank you all so much for being here with us.
This call is from a correction facility and is subject to monitoring and recording. Thank you for using GTL.
Hey, what's up, bro?
Hey, bro, what you doing?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask some questions on the condition that you're going through.
I mean, bro, we getting over sentenced for petty crimes. You know what I'm saying? Break up homes, break up families. People go through mental issues. I mean, I'm at a lower level, so everybody know they ready to go home.
Do you want me to tell anybody in the family anything for you?
Just tell them keep fighting for me, man. Pushing for that herb relief. Get me on out here and help me get back to the side so I can do the things that's necessary to take care of me and my family.
Yes, thank you. Oh, yes, Lord. Thank you, Jesus, for your presence with us in worship this morning. Thank you for praising. Yeah.
Good morning, church. And I didn't plan to say anything or speak till you know who asked. Almost 20 years ago, this one, my son, got in trouble. But I thought the criminal justice system was fair. I learned quickly that it was not. It took my son to be incarcerated almost 19 years. If I didn't do anything, I learned. I read and I learned about the system. There was no way in any of my adult life did I think that I would be doing any work at all with criminal justice reform. Not until this happened to my son. The crime versus the amount of time. All these years, almost 19 years, he sat in a prison, 4 years in solitary confinement. I cried. He lost all the rest of his 20s. He lost all of his 30s. They took his life away. They took years away from him. He did what he had to do to survive. and he got a conditional pardon from the governor. He has his rights restored.
For too many people, jails and prisons are out of sight and out of mind. So they see what they want to see and not what's actually happening. Unlike other agencies where they're directly responsible either to the legislature, the governor, there's not much accountability for the Department of Corrections. You know, their budget is twice the size of the budget for the entire city of Richmond to operate.
My name is Vishal Agraharkar, and I work at the ACLU of Virginia. I'm a senior staff attorney there. We get somewhere between 2,000 and 3,000 intakes a year. About 60% of them actually are from people who are incarcerated. By far the largest single complainee that we get reports from is the Department of Corrections and their facilities and their wardens and their officers.
Virginia has an incarceration rate of 749 per 100,000 people, meaning that it locks up a higher percentage of people than any other democracy on earth.
Our only solution to all of societal ills, including mental health, including it's all to incarcerate those who break the rules.
Over 128,000 Virginians are currently struggling with this system. I think about how their family is affected. If one person has 3 to 4 family members that they're intimately connected with, that's over 500,000 Virginians who are intimately connected with the criminal justice system. That is more than the population of Virginia Beach.
Most people in prison are not innocent of the crimes that they are convicted of. That said, the reactions to those crimes can still be extreme, can still be rooted in dehumanization that is clear in this country, is deeply embedded in a racist history that's a part of a through line that uses dehumanization as a pretext to treat Black residents in particular a certain way and legitimates the state being able to disappear them from their homes and their communities for very long periods of time.
Even though Black people and people of color tend to still be the most targeted in terms of incarceration in general, there are a lot of people going to prison nowadays. And those people are not all Black, and they're not all of color.
It's high time that we restore these principles of accountability and responsibility to our justice system here in Virginia.
Virginia doesn't really have parole. It was abolished under Governor Allen in the 90s. I mean, to not have parole means you don't have hope.
Machinery that brings people into the prison system, you don't really realize just how flawed and deeply flawed those systems are, and sometimes how little empathy the people in charge of those systems have for those who are incarcerated.
I don't want anybody to go through the things that I've gone through. And so whatever I learn, I believe in sharing, and I believed in sharing it with others. We began a support group hosting monthly meetings. We still got a long way to go. We got parole, we got expungement, we got solitary confinement, we have pardons, we have too many other issues, and then we have the day-to-day prison operations, the way our loved ones are treated while they're incarcerated. We don't have time.
I paid $7,000 to get the court reports to show people, but besides that journalist that's there, nobody takes the time to read it. Then my son he worked in the coal mines, he had 6 surgeries on his hand, then had trouble with his knee, and the doctors would not help him get off of the OxyContin. He went to prison in 2000. He was in his 20s.
And now how old is he?
He's 51. He's 51. And the court system, they do what they want to. I didn't know nothing about the laws. I thought it was all good. Well, I know our judges, our courts are not right. You know, they don't care.
When you examine kind of the some of these doctrines and some of these laws that make it so hard for people to kind of address the concerns that they have, that's the impression that you get, that even the people in charge of examining these claims are not really seeing them as fully human.
It's the harsh conditions that people are often subjected to, typically subjected to into this country, are also not fairly, not appropriately, not constitutionally, but a part of the popular imagination when it comes to, you know, what it means to be imprisoned. This dehumanized response. So why is dehumanization such a part of the criminal legal system? It is built upon the racial caste system that legitimized slavery, that legitimized Jim Crow, and that now legitimizes very extreme reactions to crime breaking.
I'm going home, oh yes, I'm going home, oh yes, I'm going home, Lord, Lord, I'm going home, I'm going home, Lord, Lord, I'm going home. My old father's crying, my old father's crying.
Which should be recognized within the criminal legal system, within Virginia's criminal legal system, is this capacity for full humanity that people inside are capable of experiencing, and the warehousing of them for perpetual punishment doesn't recognize that full capacity.
I'm going home.
I ride through this city every day, and this reminds me of where I used to be. And I'm so grateful. I'm actually going out on the street, and what I like to do is go out and basically survey folks, take a straw poll. Man, this is all about quality of life. We can talk about reentry and recidivism rates and all those things, but even though folks may not be going back to prisons, and that's another story, but how is their quality of life?
I entered the school to prison pipeline at the age of 15 as an honor roll student in high school my freshman year. And the following year I fell off a cliff and find myself incarcerated in a juvenile facility. Approximately 15 years of my life was spent inside, either jail, prison, or a lot of institutions. I battled drug addiction and homelessness throughout the entire time. So inside the prisons, I experienced trauma and developed these skills to be inside where I was an artist. So I was an artist most places I went. You know, everybody knows who these are. Malcolm, Obama, and Martin. The triumphant. These are, oh yes. Yeah, all these pictures were done inside. I even had my mark on here. I didn't even put my signature. I was just doodling one day, and it's the image that came in my head. I know it's not a great, I mean, it's kind of depressing. It can make you angry, but it was just how I felt. Most people will say, why are you here? Most people, why are you in prison? You don't seem like the type of guy that should be in prison. And so I think prisoners and folks in the criminal justice system are given a bad shape. It came to a life change. I had to make a decision. And from May 20th of 2010, from that point on, I dedicated my life to helping others and found myself on a path that brought me right into community organizing. So I feel as though it's my responsibility to share my story and expose some of these things and change the narrative. It's going to take a mass effort, a public consensus to move the way we need to in terms of incarceration. We have to change a lot of these false narratives around incarceration and prisons.
Crime, cops and robbers, that type of reporting has always been in the fabric of the American society.
Lane and Candace, criminologists have been sounding the alarm about rising violent crime rates.
The narrative around how we talk about responses to crime complicate the social policies that govern responses to crime.
13 News Now investigates life inside Virginia's prisons.
Well, David, we've seen what happens when prisons are short-staffed. Inmates try to take advantage.
There's just a range of dog whistling that, depending on who is using the language, the context of the conversation, is reinforcing people's bias or people's fears around a specific issue.
A lot of times they do call the lawyer of the person who is been accused of the crime. For good reason, those folks cannot speak because it can compromise their case. So what does the reporter go on? The law enforcement, as well as the DA's office, all of them, they're really good at using the media to tell their narrative.
Officer after officer got in touch with us, and they want everyone to know they're not the only ones at risk in this situation. The public is as well.
Public safety a lot of times is only seen through one lens, and that is the lens of law enforcement. But then when it's time, when that person is incarcerated or when that person has gotten an outlandish sentence, it becomes difficult to reach them, right? Getting an interview with someone who's incarcerated is difficult. When you have that type of narrative over and over again, you get it in your daily news, you get it in your entertainment, it leaves very little room to think of a person who is incarcerated as more than as a human being and not just this evil person who needs to be put away. Get educated about actual statistics and data on recidivism and what's actually happening in the criminal justice system, because those one story or two stories can't be the full picture.
It's truly my pleasure to have the opportunity to address you as you embark on your careers in corrections. Some will argue that corrections is the last stop along the criminal justice continuum. But I will argue that in some instances, we are the first line of defense. With you, our newest employees, we expect to continue in that tradition. Thank you very much, and Godspeed to you.
I'm Cameron Washington. I'm the legal intake assistant at the ACLU of Virginia. We receive several thousand letters a year, and I go through them one by one and try to make sense of them, what the person writing the letter would like for us to do for them, if we can do anything for them. And after I ask those initial questions, I sort of decide what to do next. The vast majority of our intakes come from incarcerated individuals. So many things take place here that aren't well known, and being that our voices are silenced allows this institutional facilities administration to get away with the inhumane treatment of all inmates housed here.
To whom it may concern, I am an incarcerated, disabled veteran in the Commonwealth of Virginia. An employee of the Department of Corrections refused to provide care and prosthetics for the disability. The employee asserts medical care expired due to age and incarceration.
They look at us as though we are some animals in a zoo. I even heard on several occasions such statements as, "You guys need to start fighting or something because we don't have anything to do." And "Our dogs are bored. When are you guys going to give them something to sink their teeth into?" These are the types of people that have been put in positions of authority over people's lives.
Can your organization help me to get free from this Virginia prison system? Can your organization help me expose the violations of the U.S. Bill of Rights by the Virginia plantation prison system?
I was physically beaten and abused, refused food, harassed verbally, and completely mishandled. I was bleeding bad, blood in chunks, and my tooth was chipped, and days after, black and green and purple on my toes and fingers from officers trying to break them. My face has burn marks from being rubbed back and forth on concrete.
One morning I complained about my food being burnt. I was maced in the face, punched in the nose. It busted my nose and I was bleeding everywhere. I tried to file a criminal complaint and they shipped me to another facility where I tried again to file a criminal complaint. And they told me he was just doing his job.
I need to get out of prison. I have a clean prison record. The parole board has been turning me down since March of 1999.
The jail was violating my civil rights while I was housed there. I was beaten very badly while I was shackled and cuffed behind my back. Also, I was in a restraint chain. I was headbutted.
They know that their lie will always be taken as truth, and the prisoner's truth will always be taken as a lie.
We are suffering. Help us to seek justice. May your heart be moved to do the right thing. Thank you, and God bless.
Right now, we rely largely on the Department of Corrections to tell us what the Department of Corrections is doing right and doing wrong by their telling not doing anything wrong. We're a small staff, and We get a lot of complaints, and we can only take on maybe 1 or 2 or 3 cases related to prisons and jails a year. I would say the largest component of complaints against the Department of Corrections have to do with medical care and mental health care, and then segregation and solitary confinement and the conditions in those facilities. And then after that, they can range the gamut, all kinds of issues that people are having on the inside. For a lot of people, it's virtually impossible to bring a lawsuit. And it's often impossible to get outside help, get attorney help, because they're, unless you're an organization like ours that is able to take on these lawsuits essentially for free, it can be hard just to even get into the courthouse door. If they say that a correctional officer did something bad to them and they don't have proof, which they almost certainly don't, then they're not going to be believed, and then they're potentially putting themselves at risk for retaliation because they might now be marked as a troublemaker. I think we need meaningful and independent oversight, and people who can go in and say, here's actually what's happening. This is what people who are incarcerated are telling me, and inform the public, inform the legislature and the legislators so that they can better perform their duty providing oversight to prisons.
I was so naive to the whole criminal justice system. I thought that all things, was going to be fair. And even with the amount of time that they had given you, which was over the guidelines, now they're going to put you in a prison that's locked down. Your very first experience in prison is to be locked down for 23 hours a day. I just couldn't imagine, I couldn't even comprehend what type of a place or what this was going to be about. So I want to know from you, how did you survive?
But in there, it's not the walls. It's not nothing physical, because the physical things we can all adapt to as human beings.
Mm-hmm.
It's being in a world where you're treated like an animal every day. You look to your left, you look to your right, you look up, you look down. Everyone. Nobody in there cares about you. Like, sometimes as a human being, you try to reminisce or think back to your most earliest childhood memory. And as you get older, those memories start to fade away. That's probably one of the most.
It's okay. It's okay. It's okay. I'm here. You here. You here. It's okay. Remember, this is the first time.
Because as a human being, excuse me, you never want to lose sense of your soul. You never want to lose sense or a feeling that you're a human being. And those prison walls have been designed, not just in Virginia, across the world, to make you lose that. Tear something from you. I guess that's why I'm so distant now with people. Because I'm still trying to find my way back.
Justice has always been a part of my life. Both of my parents were incarcerated when I was 10 years old. I was wrongfully convicted of a crime in 2004. And in my heart of hearts, I know that I am innocent, and I've always maintained my innocence. But at the end of 3 days, being the only Black person in a courtroom, none of that mattered. When people see that conviction in black and white on paper, They don't care that I'm innocent. They don't care that my life was ripped away from me. And it got me to a point where I wanted to fight against this system. And I became a barber. Everybody knows that your barber is like your therapist. Your hairstylist is like your therapist. So I met so many people who had this felony conviction in common with me. And it was just mind-blowing to me that so many people have this thing in common and there's no relief. I want to make sure that women feel loved and special once they have gone through those processes, because it is trauma. You know, it's a harrowing experience to be incarcerated and leave the community and leave family. We definitely need to figure out a better way to support those people as they're coming home, because women, they're expected to come home and make it happen. Come home and be the head of the household again with little to no support.
Talking about transitional housing, you know, we hear about a lot of the transitional housing for men, but I don't really hear a lot about it for women.
I think I know maybe 2 places. You know, we have a lot of programs for fathers and guys who are coming home, but I noticed like there are not a lot of resources for women who are being released from prisons in Virginia.
It's a big need in our community. What about like integration back with families and children? You don't really hear about that much either. And you know, even though my partner has been out now for over 15 years, we still as a family feel the impact to his incarceration.
You know, we're often as women just kind of discounted in all the situations when we're talking about incarceration. We don't get the same level of respect in the situation. Whether you are the partner or you are the person who has been incarcerated, we end up having to make more out of less. The experts on the subject matter at this point are people who have gone through the processes and gone through the systems and survived. We have to be the voices who make the changes in these systems now. I was angry about a system that was broken. I thought was broken at the time, but as we all know, it works just as it's supposed to work. I feel that when I walk into these buildings where I was never designed to be, that I am taking position to fight against what has been designed to break me for years. Well, thank you for taking the time to meet with us. We really wanted to meet and talk about 2022 and DOC oversight and women in incarceration. The lack of support and resources for women who are incarcerated and women who are coming home from incarceration.
You can see, based on who's put bills in and how people have voted, that it is not a partisan issue. Everybody's political views and their policy views are shaped by what they know. And if you don't know what's actually happening in the prison system, then you're going to legislate based on stereotype.
People from all different types of demographics fight criminal justice reform. And they're doing it because they feel like it's really about public safety.
With my signature on this legislation, we're sending an unmistakable message to criminals or anyone who might be contemplating criminal activity. And that message is, do not commit crime in Virginia. We'll no longer tolerate it.
I can stop in the middle, right? People who are committing crimes don't necessarily know about these laws and bills that are being signed.
Got special pens for this. This is special session, special pens.
You can't solve crime with the flick of a pen. You can't arrest your way out of the problems of poverty and education and mental illness and lack of employment. Over-incarcerating, giving excessive sentencing, ending parole, all of that doesn't solve the issue that they seek to solve. And we're seeing the effects of that today.
They work for you. They were elected, even if you didn't vote them in, they were elected by the people, by your community.
Well, I would hope that Virginia legislators are looking seriously at decarceration efforts and ways to significantly reduce the number of people in prison given the growth over the last 30 to 40 years.
Well, and I'll keep working on it. And but what is very helpful, you put a face and many voices behind the problem, and we need to see and hear that here, because a big part of the problem is, and you said it, out of sight, out of mind.
It is really important for people to understand that if you are in these positions of power, you should not forget people who can't show up like everyone else shows up.
If we look at injustice, we have a righteous indignation. When we see something done wrong, we ought to feel bad about it. We ought not to go along with it. We ought to talk about it. Jesus talked about it. He didn't tell people how much they should go to church. He said we should feed those who are hungry. That you should clothe those who are naked. You should visit those who are in prison. You should welcome the stranger. That's what he was saying. This is what we should do. That's how we become one.
Though you may be incarcerated and you may be in prison, but prison doesn't have to be inside of you. You are more than the mistake that you made. And I truly believe that. And if I believe you're more than the mistake that you made, then you should be afforded a second chance. You should be treated like a human being that you are. You are a human being first and foremost.
This is one of my favorites. I like to consider it a self-portrait. And basically about how I was looking forward to my resurrection. I was looking forward to coming home. It takes about 3 months to create this. Being up on my bunk, but this is like one of my favorites. Breaking out, never going back.
Every experience I've had while at Red Onion was not in vain. Everything that was intended to break me physically and psychologically only turned out to do the opposite. When things happen in life, we all have the option to either conform, fold, or resist.
If a soul is left in darkness, sin will be committed. The person that committed the sin is not the guilty one, but the person that created the darkness. And we've been living in a system of oppression and of darkness all our lives. And it's our job to change the narrative and to crush all of the lies.
People who have a stake in this are fighting the fight and showing up and getting to a point where they're no longer invisible. They won't be ignored.
We have to do those uncomfortable things as advocates and legislators and community members. They're uncomfortable, but they have to be done. We have to remain hopeful that we'll get through all these struggles I mean, that hope is what carried our ancestors and our elders and parents. Hope will make you stand up when you want to lay down. Hope will make you speak out when everybody's telling you to be quiet.
I want to believe that if people, if the public saw and heard about what we hear every day, they will back and they will support a lot of necessary changes that would move us in the direction of a different and better and more rehabilitative vision.
How can those problems be solved that doesn't erase people or disappear people or doesn't understand people's full humanity, but trying to understand exactly what can we do to be making communities safer and stronger and keep people whole.
These are human beings that we know and love and trust, and we want them out.
I'm going home, oh yes, I'm going home, oh yes, I'm going home, Lord, Lord, I'm going home, I'm going home, Lord, Lord, I'm going home. My baby sister's crying, my baby sister's crying, brother come home, Lord.
All right, thank you, everybody. Hope you enjoyed that showing of InJustice, and I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to Sean Winetta, who will introduce himself.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you for participating. Thank you for watching, and we're really excited to have a conversation after the film. There is a few of us here that were part of this film to talk about it tonight. All of us directly impacted by the criminal legal system in Virginia, and particularly the Department of Corrections. So my name is Sean Winetta. I am a policy and advocacy strategist here with the ACLU of Virginia. You saw me in the film. I was with the Humanization Project at the time when we did this filming, but I've been in this position at the ACLU for about coming up on a year and a half now. So thank you so much for joining us tonight. And I want to introduce our panel members. This film has been shown all over Virginia, universities, theaters. We were in the Richmond International Film Festival, from Charlottesville to Harrisonburg to Northern Virginia, down to Hampton, and some form or another of this panel has been together for most of those showings, but we got the band back together today. So I'm going to introduce our panelists today. I'm going to start with a good friend, Sheba Williams. Sheba Williams is the executive director of No Left Turns, a Richmond-based nonprofit organization whose mission is to reduce recidivism by supporting and advocating alongside those with court and justice involvement. Her work involves addressing many of the root causes and collateral consequences that lead to incarceration. Also going to introduce my friend Donald Allen. He is the third, Donald Allen III, I apologize. Make sure I get the name right all the way across. Donald is a returning Virginian who served an egregious and at times inhumane 18+ year sentence inside the Virginia Department of Corrections prior to being pardoned during the COVID-19 pandemic on April 3rd, 2020 by Governor Ralph Northam. Since his release, he's been welcomed by family, close friends, and his community. And Donald is gainfully employed as a forklift operator. Welcome, Donald. Good to see you again. We're also going to welcome Christopher Rashad Green. Christopher Rashad Green is a community activist, motivational speaker, and the founder of Freedom Unlimited. He is formerly incarcerated, who is now, as a political organizer and health equity advocate, is on a journey to empower men, women, and children in overcoming the challenges and injustices of the criminal justice system. And another little nugget about me that I left out at the beginning, I am also formerly incarcerated. Like Donald, I am a fellow pardon recipient from Governor Northam, also in April of 2020. So I spent 16 years incarcerated in the Virginia Department of Corrections. So welcome, Sheba, welcome, Donald, and welcome, Christopher. It's good to be here with you this evening. So we're going to start out with a couple questions, and I want to remind people who are watching, if you have questions for members of the panel, please drop them in the Q&A. There might be a chat function as well. If you drop them in there, hopefully we'll get the questions here, and we'll try and answer them in the chat as well. We'll try to get to all of your questions, but I am going to start out with a question for Christopher and ask Christopher, what are some misconceptions that people have about people that are involved in the criminal legal system?
Thank you, Sean. Good to be here. I want to say hello to all my fellow advocates, everybody. I just want to appreciate being able to speak for the voiceless, as they put in the chat. And I want to honor the ancestors and those who went before us. So to answer your question, I thought about this, and for me, it's like, over the years, all my years of incarceration, I've seen historically how instead of people being charged, it's like there's a presumption of guilt now instead of innocence. It's like when you're arrested now, you have to prove your innocence rather than being assumed innocent, and then the state having to prove your guilt. And I think that's fair and unjust. And I don't think, like, most people don't realize it, like the masses of people, like based on social media. So that's my answer to that is like, presumption of guilt instead of innocence for most, especially for Black and brown and poor folks. Thank you, Sean.
Thanks, Christopher. And I'm going to shoot one, Donald, to you now. Good to see you again. Thanks for joining us tonight. I know you're really busy with work and all that you have going on. So thank you for giving us some time tonight, Donald. So Donald, I'm going to give you the same question that we had when we were at the Bowtie Theater for the premiere, and ask you what was something that was in the documentary that you think might be surprising to people that have limited experience with the criminal legal system?
The amount of disconnect from the world, from human life, from feeling like a human being. The whole film, not only from when I spoke, from when everyone spoke, that's a disconnect from human life. And to expect for someone to come out from inside those walls, inside those gates and those barbed wires, and the punishment and everything that you see from inside those walls, to just come back out here in the world and think that everything is just fine within us, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. Physically, we might look okay, but there's times that we all go through our moments of struggles and stuff like that when we out here. And it's more internal with us, you know, and just be mindful of us, you know, and help us, you know, sometimes, you know, talk to us, kind gestures and stuff like that, anything, you know, but just to know that we still human beings, we feel things, we have emotions, you know, like I'm a man, you know, I'm not afraid to cry and different things, and, you know, but I find a way of releasing those things through other things, like going to the park and stuff like that. So, you know, just want people to know that, like, it's real serious to be made to feel like you an animal. And then to come back out here and really try to be right for the world and right for yourself, you know?
Thank you, Donald. And that's something that we certainly try and highlight. And there's organizations that participated in this film, and the Humanization Project does a lot of work to try and humanize people that are returning from incarceration, particularly, and make sure that people, again, see them as human and being just like us. We have dreams and hopes and you know, for our families and for our friends and for the people that we care about, just like anybody else who might not have, you know, been involved in the criminal legal system. Sheba, so good to see you. Sheba, your work focuses on helping returning citizens and especially women, and we highlighted that here in the documentary. But you really work to help women get back on their feet and realize their full potential. So what does support look like to you? What do women impacted by the criminal legal system need in order to succeed? Because so much of it is geared towards men. So what specifically do women need in order to be able to succeed when returning to the community?
I think I just have to go back on what Donald said. Support looks like helping people feel like human beings. Like, since this system has begun, we have always been cast as second-class citizens. support doesn't always look like money. Sometimes it looks like hiring a person who has a past record, housing a person who has a past record, taking a chance on opportunity. Like, you know, there are so many things that can be done, but a lot of things that are lacking with women. There are not a lot of support systems. There are not a lot of resources. Housing is the biggest thing that keeps people from being successful at reentry. And when we talk about transitional housing, a lot of times women want to get back to their families. They want to get back to their children. I think about 56%, and I may have the numbers wrong, of women who are incarcerated are mothers. And removing them from the community oftentimes means that we're taking away from children. We're taking away from our neighbors. So support does look like money. Support does look like changing policy, but most importantly, changing hearts and minds and making sure that these 1 in 3 adults that are impacted by this criminal legal system are treated like human beings, supporting our fight for things like being able to vote. You know, we lose a lot of things when we go through these systems. And the most important thing that I can always think of is treating your brother or sister just like that. You know, that's the biggest thing.
So this is a question for everybody, and whoever wants to answer it can go ahead and jump in. But what do you most want people to take away from this film after seeing it?
Can I share on that? Because I really want to piggyback on what Sheba just said. And the biggest takeaway for me is to think of all the children and the families who are affected by it. We have millions and millions of individuals going in and out of jails and prisons. We don't ever think about the families and how it affects the children. To me, it's like almost like a genocidal policy that's in place, because you're severing from, you're messing up families. You know, creating a permanent underclass, but people are still getting rich off of this whole system, this complex system of mass incarceration, ergo prison privatization. But again, I want people to take away from this film, not only the men and women that they think might be guilty or deserving to be incarcerated, but do children and families need to be broken up? Do children need to suffer? So when I see this, I think of all the children, and I am one of those children whose parents were incarcerated. So that's my takeaway. I hope people take that away from the film, the humanity of it, and seeing, like, having empathy for families. Thank you, Sean.
And let me piggyback off of that as well, and I'll throw to Donald or Sheba if you want to chime in there too. One of the most sort of and Christopher, you hit on on the money that's involved in the prison industrial complex, and we know it's an $80 billion a year prison industry. That ranges from private prisons, where actually a small portion of it, less than 10%. But when you get into the people that provide phone calls, commissary, deposit fees, debit release cards, all the different collateral fees and expenses that come with incarceration. But you really hit on something that, and I guess Sheba hit on it first, and Christopher, you hit on it as well, and is the generational impact that incarceration has. And I share this story when I hear people sort of talking about generational impact of incarceration. I distinctly remember one Thanksgiving that I was in prison, and I was at the Thanksgiving meal, and I saw in the chow hall 3 generations of men sitting at a table. It was grandfather, father and son sitting at the table having Thanksgiving meal together. And the son had grown up, this is at Greensville Correctional Center, the son had grown up visiting his father in the visiting room at this very prison, and was now there having Thanksgiving dinner, was incarcerated there, now having Thanksgiving dinner. And later that day, I went to go to a visit, and I saw that young man who was having dinner with his father and grandfather in the visiting room being visited by his young son. And I remember thinking, wow, there's 4 generations of men in this family that are being impacted by this very same prison, and just how impactful that was to me. So it is generational, and don't let anybody tell us that it's not. And I'll get out of the way for Donald and others to speak.
Yes. 2 things real quick. One, the financial part about it. Not only what it costs the inmates us former prisoners inside there to actually purchase things, but taxpayer dollars. This is what they're doing with people, taxpayer dollars, recklessly spending, using the money towards doing the wrong things. And also, I know this might feel like I'm shifting a little bit, but I watch the news every day, and it's tiresome seeing more and more things happening out here, crimes by kids. And if families don't start waking up, this is where your kids is going to be subject to have to deal with. So either they're going to go through something in the streets where somebody's going to be killed in the streets, or they're going to be destroyed humanely in prison. Get a hold of people, children. Get a hold of like your own kids. Do what you have to do, because lives are being lost out here in the world. Watching the news every day. You know, this film was a reality check on both sides from every different spectrum that you could possibly think of. You know, it's touching lives, our households, our families, ourselves. Take it serious, because it can happen to any of us. Mm-hmm. My mother never thought it was going to happen to me, you know, and I say peace with that.
So that's a good segue, and Sheba, I want to sort of throw this to you, and Donald, you talked about what this is costing, not just families but taxpayers. And you know, there's 8 million people in Virginia. In some form or another, they are contributing to the budget of Virginia. And I want to run it. There were some stats that were sort of shown in the beginning of the film. Some of that has increased. This film is now, like, we started filming this, I think 2 years ago now. And DOC's budget has continued to increase. DOC enjoys a $1.5 billion budget in the current fiscal year. They incarcerate about 25,000 people on any given day, and they employ about 10,000 people. And there is zero independent oversight for the Virginia Department of Corrections. A couple other little things that we've discovered in the past year. 10 years ago, the Department of Corrections incarcerated 10,000 more people than they do now, and they employed an additional 1,000 people than they do now. Their budget then was $800 million. It is now $1.5 billion. 10,000 fewer people incarcerated, 1,000 fewer people employed, but an additional $700 million a year they are given by the General Assembly, and that is from the taxpayers. That is unheard of, that an agency that large doesn't have any sort of oversight. Another little thing for context, in Virginia, there's a potato seed oversight board in Virginia. However, not oversight of the Virginia Department of Corrections. And Sheba, I'd like to ask you, and this is sort of like the last point that we hit on when the film premiered at the film festival, was why we need oversight. Like, it's easy to talk about the numbers, but why do we need oversight? Well, you know, Virginia sort of, DOC says, hey, we have the best recidivism rate in the country, you know, but why is oversight necessary if sort of the numbers are bearing out what they are?
The first thing is, we all believe in accountability. We think that in a system where people, you know, commit crimes, that it is fair to say accountability is necessary. Accountability does not always need to look like handcuffs. We put about $12,000 into educating a student each year. We put $31,000 per person to incarcerate a person. And we are looking at lack of resources. We're looking at what we take away, but we're talking about putting all this money into a system. And every single year, the number one line budget item in Virginia is going towards public safety. We know what's happening in our communities. We know what has been divested from, and we have been asking for care. We have been asking for treatment. We have been asking for investment in our teachers in our schools so that people know their options, they understand the law, and they understand how to make economic empowerment so that they're not going through these systems. But we put so much money into a system, and they can turn their backs and say, you all don't need to see what we're doing. You all don't need to know what's going on. They are killing people in these systems. For the past 3 years, when the pandemic happened, statewide volunteers like myself have not been able to go into the systems. Programming has been shut down or largely decreased until very recently, but we still had an uptick in overdoses. Nobody questioned what's going on with that. We still have people who are being sentenced to extremely long sentences that do not match the crime. And before people say, well, these people do the crime, they should do the time, you have to know that the sentencing laws are so vastly different for people who look like me based on what they do. We still have 576 individuals who have cannabis convictions incarcerated. So the people who try to justify this system, they say the worst of the worst, the rapists and the killers, they should be locked up forever. Nobody's looking at the people who are locked up who have substance use disorder, who have behavioral health disorder, or who have living in poverty. Living in poverty is criminalized. The most expensive thing you can be is poor. And that is taken advantage of, because we talk about policing, when we talk about over-policing, over-incarcerating, over-sentencing, over-criminalization, you see them in the poorest communities, and they are easy targets because they have less access to employers. So when we talk about the need for oversight, we're not saying that we want anything that we're not paying for through our tax dollars. We're saying that if my organization, who made $50,000 for the first 3 years, had to file my taxes and answer to the Virginia Department of Agriculture and charitable solicitation, then why doesn't this organization that we all pay for have to answer to anybody? Because you can write on a piece of paper that you have PREA and you have protections, but we still saw those people talking about how they were kicked in the mouth and deprived of medical equipment. And I have family who is still in this system. I have a loved one who has been incarcerated for 25 years and he'll be home this year, but he shares a cell with his son, who shares his namesake. I have 3 uncles who have life sentences who have been at Greensville. And when the system breaks down, guess who they ask to keep the calm in the system? Those very people that we say are not redeemable and not worthy of second chances. Unmute.
So there is, I got a couple more questions, and I want to get to one that came through the chat, and it was about specifically about oversight and the legislation that came forward, has been coming forward for 2 years now. Actually, this was the 3rd year. Delegate Hope for 2 years carried a bill that would create independent oversight over the Virginia Department of Corrections. Unfortunately, it died both times that he carried it. This year, Senator Marsden carried the bill. And it wasn't because Delegate Hope wanted to give up on it or anything like that. He is still all for it. It was just a strategic decision that was made to carry the bill through the Senate. Those of you that watched it saw that it was unanimously approved by the Senate at every single vote. Same thing was happening in the House. However, the House Appropriations killed the bill on a partisan line vote. Although I know members of the Republican Party and the House Republicans that wanted that bill pretty badly, but it was our understanding is certainly opposed by the Department of Corrections, and therefore opposed. The Department of Corrections doesn't sort of oppose anything unless the governor sort of gives their thumbs up on it, because they are an executive agency. As far as will it be brought back, it is not entirely dead right now. There's a lot of like really, I don't want to get too wonky. I'm a policy guy, so I'm kind of a nerd on some of these things. It is still alive in the budget. The budget, it is, there is a budget amendment to create oversight. It is still in the budget. We'll see how that works out in negotiations. That's still, those negotiations are ongoing. We are hopeful that it will be created through the budget. Some of you that followed earned sentence credits remember last year how you can legislate through the budget and they repealed some earned sentence credits. Well, you know what? We can legislate through the budget and implement oversight the same way. So, so we will be watching that as we move forward. And even if it does not pass through the budget, we will still come back to codify it again next year, hopefully with the legislature that is favorable towards it. I'm going to hit one more question in the chat from Norma Jean. This is my first time looking at it, so forgive me if I'm bad on this. I've received mail from inmates asking for help on an issue, but I get pushback from the facility about talking or interviewing the individual. Have any of you been able to speak with a reporter while incarcerated? Anyone had repercussions from trying to reach a member of the media? I'll open that up to the panel while we're incarcerated. And any of you try and reach out or be reached out to by the media?
No, I haven't.
I'll just say it's a very difficult process. A lot of times, members of the media have to be educated on how people who are incarcerated communicate. A lot of them don't even know that there is a secure messaging system that exists, but the person who is incarcerated has to agree. And a lot of times, if they don't know a person, they may not agree. But like when you send mail in, when you have phone calls with people who are incarcerated, they are subject to monitoring and recording. So a lot of times we don't get a lot of people who speak out. We do have a lot of people who are incarcerated who speak to their loved ones and try to communicate that way. But I don't hear a lot of reporters who have success in speaking to people who are incarcerated without having a person who is willing to mediate that conversation.
So, and I can say, oh, go ahead, Christopher.
Yeah, and I agree with you on that, Sheba, and I'm sure Donald can testify, like the culture of the oppressive culture in prisons. Like anybody who does speak out, you're subject to being, transferred, put in the hole. There's always some punitive action that's hovering if you speak out against anything inside the prison. But as she said, there are individuals who are bold enough to step up and speak out, but there's always there's always repercussions or that are possible when you're locked down like that.
And I'll sort of try and put a bow on this, and forgive me, I forgot the name of the person who asked the question already. But there's a policy that governs this, and I'll try and put it in the chat while somebody else is answering a question. DOC has a media access policy, and it sort of determines who can come into different facilities. And they do sort of make accommodations for people. If you're at a higher level facility, they won't let the press inside. However, they'll make accommodations for phone calls and things like that to do phone interviews. So there is opportunities for that. So I want to sort of throw one question. We're running out of time, but I do want to sort of throw a question out here again to the group. And please, Christopher and Sheba and Donald, if you wouldn't mind putting in RHD's information in the chat if you're able. It looks like you might be on your phone. But members of the panel, please put information about your organization and how to reach out to you in the chat. So people who are watching, there's some questions that are in the chat that are that y'all would be best at addressing, so they can reach out to you for some of these things. The most powerful portion of the film to me is the very end. And Christopher, it's when you're speaking and you talk about hope and the different things that hope can do for you while you're incarcerated. And I know that it was powerful for me. I expect it was powerful for Donald. Sheba, as you've gone through so much that you've gone through just in the time that we've been friends in the last few years. What does hope mean to you? And how do you hold on to hope in the face of such opposition and the pushback that we get? And what are you hopeful for? And whoever wants to start it, please.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's something that hope for me equates to freedom. Ergo, Freedom Unlimited, the name of my nonprofit. Because with hope, I'm free from pain, from loss, from anxiety. And with hope, I have freedom to pursue my divine life, my divine life path. And so with hope, and I keep that hope because I have individuals in my family and what I call my village. Everybody on this call, everybody who's attending, I lean into them. And that's how it strengthens my hope, because I have a family. I have all these great advocates. I have people like Sheba and Donna I can lean into. And for me, that what hope just carries me to know that hopefully that there'll be some light at the end of the tunnel. There's sunlight around the corner. Thank you.
Yes, hope for me, another chance. I have good days, I have bad days. My family could tell you I have some bad days, but those same days are great days because I still have hope. The next second, the next minute, the next hour, that's my opportunity again to improve, to be better than how I was 30 seconds ago. To keep getting back up every day, not forgetting where I come from. I watched my personal video of when my family filmed me walking out those doors. out them gates every single day to remind me. I walk around with a copy of my ID that I once held inside those walls every day with me to remind me where I come from, that I'm blessed now. At least I stand a fighting chance to make my life better and be a voice for those same men and women that are still incarcerated. Yes, the women are definitely incarcerated too, and they're going through it, and like they need support more than anybody else do. And I say peace with that.
All right. Hope is knowing people who have survived these systems and seeing all the good that they do in the world today. We have so many people who have caused harm in the community who come back and give back and take that opportunity, because not a lot is given to people. They deal with the scarlet letter of having an F on their chest, and they still are resilient enough to keep going. Hope is knowing that I graduated from college and I have 3 children who are in college against my free will, and they're taking all my money, but they are the future that will fix these broken systems. Hope is seeing my great niece, who was born after I lost my mom and my grandmother in 2021, knowing that the fight that we're in today impacts the people that will come behind us. And hope is knowing that the work that I put in, the sleepless nights, the rest, and having these conversations and sharing my story will change somebody's heart and mind to say, yes, I need to be a better neighbor to somebody who may not have the same opportunities as me. So thank you all. And I hope that that means that you will look at how to better break down the barriers that come with these systems. Sean, you're muted.
You're muted.
Thanks so much. Thanks for giving me a Zoom lesson, and it's good to have the band back together. It's good to see everybody, and thank you so much, everybody, for joining us for the documentary screening and dynamic and compelling discussion. We'll be sharing the link of the InJustice documentary with you all, so you can share it with your own networks and help us raise awareness about the brokenness of Virginia's carceral system. I want to thank our panelists for joining us tonight and for sharing their lived experiences in the film. Sheba, Donald, Christopher, the work you do as advocates and activists is so inspiring and truly moves this work forward, even as the political landscape can feel like it's working against the progress we all want to see. Please go ahead and we already did drop your contact information in the chat, but if you want to drop it again, feel free. I think it was so inspiring to have you here. The ACLU of Virginia is so grateful for our supporters across the state who continue to help us move forward and continue to push for change. We couldn't do this work without you either. Please make sure you're following us on social media and find the latest updates on our website, acluva.org. And I want to close with Christopher's words, if we can. And I think that's, hopefully it will inspire you to get involved. Getting involved as you do is what gives people like us that were incarcerated and are just as involved, and what gives us hope. And we need you to speak out on the behalf of people that can't speak out for themselves. As you said, hope will make you stand up when people are telling you to sit down. Hope will make you speak out when people are telling you to be quiet. So we hope that you will join in this fight with us. Thank you so much, and we hope to see you soon.